In this video, we're going to take a look at the installation and initial configuration of the vSphere Data Protection Appliance, which is going to allow us to do backups of our virtual machines inside the virtual disks associated with this virtual machine that we've imported as a virtual appliance. So we're going to go on VMware's website and download the OVA file, which is a single archive file that stores all the various metadata associated with the virtual machine. We import that in and then select a host and data center to put it on. Now, depending on the size of backups that you plan to take, there's different versions of this appliance available on the website. So if we take a look in the folder where I put them, we'll see that I've got a file called vSphere Data Protection 0.5tb.ova. So what that's going to allow us to do is back up to 500 gigabytes of data inside this virtual machine. Now, we can't change these options because of the way the file system is structured internally inside this virtual appliance. It uses various Avamar deduplication technologies. So we can't really manipulate the partitions and the file systems that are inside this appliance. So we're going to need to download the correct one. If you're not sure, the better option would be to download one of the larger ones. And if you're using thin provisioning, you might never get to the point that it's full. But if you need that space in the future and you make that space available, you'll be able to without having to deploy a new copy of the appliance. What I had done was just gone to the file menu inside my vSphere client connected to vCenter and said deploy OVF template, and then brought in that file. And it asked me for a name for the virtual machine. I just left it at vSphere Data Protection. And it also asked me, what host I wanted to put it on, what cluster I wanted to put it on. If there was resource pools, I would have been asked for that. And it also asked me for the storage placement. This 0.5 TB version of the appliance actually takes more than half a terabyte to associate its disks. So it actually is about 850 gigabytes total for that half terabyte appliance, because there's a bit of overhead associated with the deduplication engine and the indexing and things that are required to maintain for that. So we're going to have to make sure that there's enough space available for all of that. And again, you really can't manipulate those things. So I'm going to choose thin provisioning and specify that they may grow to that size in the future, but I better hope I don't actually try to use all that space. If we go ahead and look in the settings of the virtual machine after it's been imported, I've actually already gone ahead and changed it a little bit, but you can't do too much here. So it initially starts with 4 CPUs, and I've taken it down to 2 because I don't actually have 4 CPUs associated with my ESX hosts, which are actually running as virtual machines in this environment. You can see I did that, and then we've got the various virtual disks created. So there's a 100 gigabyte virtual disk, 256, another 256, and then yet another 256 after that. Even though it says half a terabyte, it actually is going to require more. So in this case, thin provisioning is going to help with that anyway. So other than that, there's not much we need to do. So I've already gone ahead and started it up. And if we connect into the console of that virtual machine, we're going to see that it basically tells us to just go use our web browser to connect and set it up. Now, if we want, there is also an option to go ahead and do a login here. And this virtual appliance is actually based on SUSE Linux. We can get in and do things like test and NS lookup and so on. The installation here is actually very sensitive to your DNS configuration. So actually, before you go ahead and import this into your environment, you really should create the DNS records for it first. So I'm just going to go ahead and do what it says and say, basically open a web browser and connect into this HTTPS URL. Now again, I've got the IP address listed here. I think I really should have had it pre-registered in DNS. If I switch over to my web browser, so as we can see, the URL here is https:// the IP address or host name of the VDP appliance, and then port 8543 and then VDP-configure. So I've already got it registered in DNS, so we'll just go ahead and connect to that. And you'll see I have an SSL certificate warning, but that's okay. I'm just going to continue anyway. Now, the default password here for the root account is actually change me, and of course, you should do that. I'll just use the current one. Okay, so now that I'm logged in, we get this welcome screen, which is actually the first part of the wizard. It's going to ask me for the various network settings. Unless I had a DHCP provided address, then I would have had to already go in on the console and configure networking there. But if we have a DHCP provided address, we can connect from there and it'll tell us on the console to use that address. Then we can come here and change it. What's very important is that we can do both a forward and a reverse DNS lookup on the host name and the IP address associated with the VDP. So I'm going to go ahead and click next. And you can see that the various network settings are listed here. And I've got my host name and my domain name already filled in. This is my second time running the wizard, but make sure that it's filled in here. And it's actually going to go out and validate that against DNS. And if it's not able to validate against DNS, you won't be able to proceed. So I did have a bit of difficulty when I initially set that up because I'd created the DNS record after the fact. So I had to restart the appliance in order to get it to pick up this new record. So that might have to happen here as well if you've gone ahead and brought it up before you had it registered in DNS. So I'll just choose my time zone, and then I'll provide the password to use for the VDP login. It's actually a very explicit password policy. Notice that it must be 9 characters, not more, not less. 1 uppercase character, 1 lowercase character, 1 number, and no special characters. And then we'll provide the details of how to log into vCenter. So I'd already completed this, provided the administrator username, the vCenter password, the host name for both my vCenter and my SSO host, and the port numbers if we had changed them. So I'll just provide the password and then go ahead and click test connection. And no problems, so I'll just go ahead, click next, and then click finish. Now it says that I can go ahead and reboot the appliance. It's not actually going to reboot the appliance though, so I'm going to need to go ahead and shut it down through the normal processes. I suppose before I do that though, if we go onto the console, you'll see there is an option to log in, and if you log in as root change me or whatever password you've assigned after you restart it. If you want to configure static addressing on this appliance without actually having to know how to do that in a Linux-oriented environment, then what we can do is go to configure network on this wizard. It looks kind of like a menu, but it's actually a checklist of things that you should go do in the web console primarily. But we do have the one option to configure the network from here, and we can set our gateway and our host name and DNS and our IP address. I'm just going to go ahead and exit out of this without changing anything. Just do a regular restart of the guest. And once that's done, we can go back in through the web interface and finish the configuration of the VDP, which we're going to take a look at in the next video.